RotoGrinders Daily Fantasy Podcasts are presented to you by Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports. This week 16, make sure you're heading over to Yahoo again if you are playing paid-for-play fantasy sports, because they've got their $1 million baller tournament back, and they also ran back the guaranteed overlay. Last week was $250,000. They're doing it again. That's over $500,000 that they are adding to the prize pool over the last 2 weeks. If you don't know what overlay means, what they're doing is $750,000 in entries is the max they can take, and they're going to be paying out $1 million. The best value in DFS is happening right now at Yahoo Sports Daily Fantasy. Check them out, rotogrinders.com/Yahoo. Use that promo code GRINDERS30 for a $30 matching deposit bonus on that first deposit. Make sure you're playing over there this week 16. It's Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Week 16 Pro Football Focus Show here on RotoGrinders. I'm Britt Devine, here with my good friends, and I'm going to apologize in advance to both viewers and people who listen on the podcast. I'm sick, Scott's sick, Tyler's sick. None of us feel good, but yet we all showed up for work today. We're all doing a little bit better than Anthony Davis is tonight. Scott, I was gone last week. Didn't play too much by the time I got back. How was Week 15 for Scott?
It was pretty good. It was kind of like a bizarro week. I wrote about that a lot. So if you didn't make too much money last week, it's fine. Maybe even a sign that you're better than not. I don't know. But week 15 was fine. Good for my season-long and dynasty leagues. How was Disney?
I mean, it's always fun. The long lines are starting to get to me, right? You go there, unless you have your fast pass, you're just stuck in line for like an hour, sometimes two, to get on any of the good rides. There's too many people, but hey, you got to make her happy sometimes, right? So you got to go. That's it's a vacation. I don't know. There's worse things that can happen, right, Scott?
Right.
Tyler, how's it go? So I got sick on the plane down there. So I was sick for the first 2 days. I come back, I'm okay. I don't know what's gotten into me. It's like a head cold, runny nose, all kinds. I'm all hopped up on Dayquil and cough drops and all kinds of stuff. What do you got going on, Tyler?
I've got this killer migraine that's been going on and off the last 2 days. It's been very hard to try to look at the computer screens and try to get my research in, but we've only got 2 more weeks left. Just going to power through it and get to the finish line.
Playoffs, showdowns, like it doesn't end. We're going Pro Bowl, Super Bowl, like it never ends, Tyler. So
yeah, not till February.
Yeah. But yeah, week 15, Scott, right? Really low scoring. It was the lowest scoring week of the season. You mentioned, if you did bad, you were probably on the right plays, but it just really didn't work out. Is that kind of how you saw? I played a little bit. My teams didn't really do too good. Thankfully, I didn't play too much, but what's your overall take? Do you think, as we go through December here, the final 2 weeks, there's a lot of random stuff. Teams are going to start sitting people, but are we going to have lower scoring games, or is like scoring going to pick up suddenly?
I don't think it'll be as bad as last week, but I do see it trending downwards. It's just more film to watch these teams. Some teams are playing them twice, more injuries, colder weather, things like that.
All right, let's jump into this for this week here. Let's start at quarterback. Tyler, I'm going to start with you because you started off here with Ben Roethlisberger, and I peppered you pre-show a little bit on Drew Brees. So I'm going to question you. You got to pick one of these guys this week, right? It's in the Superdome. We're looking at some really, 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 really strong recency bias on Drew Brees, who is, on 3 road games. We know Drew Brees on the road doesn't really do too good. He returns back at home. Then we've got the Big Ben narrative, Big Ben on the road. Which one of these is going to play out this week? So if you have to pick between one of these 2 quarterbacks, which one is it? And then, do you think Drew Brees is going to kind of continue the trend of not a lot of passing yards, not a lot of touchdowns? Is New Orleans going to stay a little bit run heavy in this game?
Yeah, it's definitely a battle of conflicting narratives here with Big Ben. His terrible historic road splits kind of conflicts perfectly with this Coors Field narrative of the Saints Superdome, where we've historically seen an uptick in passing and a lot of scoring in the past. I'm super into this play of Big Ben. He's the top price quarterback among almost every site. I think that's naturally going to lower ownership across the field. The Saints' pass funnel defense has done a terrific job stopping opposing rushing attacks, forcing opponents to throw against the Saints. As such, they've allowed the fifth most passing yards to opposing QBs. Big Ben's a guy that I think should take advantage of that. We're going to see Pittsburgh entering the Superdome as 5.5 point road dogs. The Saints are implied for 29.5 points. If the Steelers are going to stay in this game, they're going to need to pass. And I think they're going to need Big Ben to play well in order to have a chance here this week.
So I've pulled up Big Ben in dome splits. He's got 9 career games, a 70% completion percentage. His highest passer rating at anything. Yards per attempt is through the roof. Scott, I'm looking at Big Ben. You know, we've got the road narrative, but if you look at the dome, now it's only 9 games, so it is a little bit of a small sample size. Dude seems to crush in those over his career. What's your take on the quarterback situation in this game?
Yeah, I don't think that really means anything, but we do know quarterbacks do tend to play better in the dome. He does have a great matchup this week. The Saints are one of the 3 top pass funnel defenses in the league. They rank 3rd worst in schedule adjusted fantasy points per game allowed to opposing quarterbacks. Roethlisberger, QB2 on the year, very quietly. Massive over-under. Yeah, I like it.
What's your take on Drew Brees? You got a strong take on this with this offense, the run game, is the pass game. 3 road games for Brees. It's really ingrained the narrative that the Saints are a run-focused team right now, and they are. But that they've been on the road, and you want to run on the road, I think, a little bit more than the Saints want to do at home. You got a strong take on the Saints offenses.
No, I really don't. Other than that, Pittsburgh's defense is, I think, one of the top 10 toughest for opposing quarterbacks. I don't think I'm going to be leaning towards Breeze this week for some of the reasons that you mentioned, but he is definitely in play.
Who do you want to talk about here, Scott? I see a couple guys. It looks like Andrew Luck's looking like he's going to be the chalk of the week here. What do you see with his matchup right now?
So yeah, I definitely like him. Giants are giving up the 5th most fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks, much more so in recent weeks, although they're more of a run funnel now, and I could see them leaning heavy on Marlon Mack, and I think they will, and I think they should. But he's just been, super productive. He's pretty cheap, I think. Massive implied total this week. I like it. Honestly, quarterback's tough this week, and it's been tough for a few weeks now. Also talked about Matt Ryan up against another pass funnel defense in the Panthers, although now with Cam Newton out, that kind of changes things a little bit.
Might not have Julio either, so
yeah, that would not be good. That would definitely take him out of contention. Also, talked about Nick Foles, just given the matchup and price tag, although not super excited about that either. Really, quarterback just feels kind of gross this week.
Yeah, 4,700 for Nick Foles. We'll talk cheap quarterbacks in a second here. We'll get into a little bit here. Tyler, I want to go back to you. So, Jared Goff, just like what's gotten into this guy over the past couple of games. Pull this up. What has he got? 1 touchdown, 6 picks in his last 3 games here. He's still chucking the ball a lot. They lose to Philadelphia at home. That was a pretty big upset. He was on the road in Chicago, not really going to hold that as a bad performance against him, right? On the road in Detroit, they still put up 30 points. He didn't really have to do too much here. He's at Arizona, right? So, what's with Jared Goff, right? They're huge favorites, but Todd Gurley's a little hobbled. Do you think they try to give Goff a little confidence, call some pass plays, get him some touchdowns kind of before they head into the playoffs here?
Yeah, for me, this is a bet kind of on regression and him getting back to how he started the year. 26 passing touchdowns in the first 11 weeks on his first 11 games. There's a banged up Todd Gurley. Makes total sense for them to utilize the pass a bit more here in this week. The Rams still have a shot at the number 1 seed. They just need to win out and have New Orleans lose one. That should mean they keep playing aggressive football down the stretch, and they have 2 really easy cupcake games against a 4-10 team and a 3-11 or whatever the records are. But I like Goff here as a contrarian play. Super cheap price tag on Yahoo, $30. But I think this is just more of a play on him returning to what he was to start the year, and try to fade recency bias.
Yeah, I think I like his receivers a little bit here as well. We'll talk about some of them. What's our, it's Wednesday night when we're recording this, if the guys listen to the podcast later. And like, what's your thoughts, I guess, on Gurley, Tyler? As it stands right now, I mean, a big favorite playing their main running back that's somewhat hurt against Arizona. This seems very familiar to me. Do you think the Rams are stupid enough to do this with Todd Gurley?
Unfortunately, I think they have him out there. I don't know how much they use him, though. I'm terrified of it. I will not be playing any Gurley this week because of it. I think at any moment we could see John Kelly come in.
CJ Anderson.
Or CJ Anderson, yeah, newly signed CJA. I won't be playing any Gurley just because I'm afraid of them taking him off the field at any moment. All
right, Scott, a couple more quarterbacks I want to talk to you about here. All right, let's talk to cheap quarterbacks. We got Nick Foles and all the way down. Tell me what you know about this Carolina backup, right? Had some good FBS or whatever they call that. Looked like he was pretty good. Team preseason, I remember using him earlier in the preseason this year. He's minimum price $4,000. Mr. Taylor Heineke, I believe is his last name. What do you know about this guy? He's going up against Atlanta, right? What do you expect out of this game? Maybe we can just talk a little bit about what's going to happen in this game with a backup quarterback.
Yeah, his stats look good because he went to Old Dominion University, which is an online college, pretty sure. Yeah, I have no interest in him. Honestly, annoyed because this might ding Christian McCaffrey, although I'm not entirely sure. Cam Newton's honestly not the most accurate quarterback, and especially on short throws for whatever reason. But hopefully they just keep giving McCaffrey 100% of the snaps and a heavy workload, and it's not going to matter. But yeah, I'm not on him. I do like Foles. Dak Prescott's another value. Yeah,
the funnel defense of Houston. It's like 4,700 for Foles. It looks like he likes Alshon Jeffrey a little bit too. Ertz could bounce back and have a big game. Who's your favorite guy to pair up with Foles here?
It's Alshon Jeffrey. I wrote about that in my actual opportunity article. It's just it's been far more productive with Foles than with Wentz for whatever reason.
We'll get to that in a minute. Stop, touting your article. We'll get to that in just a second here. Tyler, a couple more quarterbacks. You got Josh Allen, right? I got to pop some more cough drops here. My throat's hurting. So Josh Allen going at New England, should be able to run a little bit more than he did last week. His targets, he did lose McKenzie, but he's got a couple of guys out there that can still catch some passes. It's a little thin out there. What are you expecting from him this week? He's 58 on DK, right? Tom Brady's 59. Dak Prescott's 57. Kirk Cousins, Matt Ryan, Baker Mayfield, they're all kind of priced together here. What's making Allen stand out for you?
It's hard to beat his consistency and price combination here. He's a great cash game option this week. He's averaged 24.3 FanDuel points per game over his last 4 outings, scoring at least 19.8 in each matchup. His rushing game is what we're really after here. 99-plus yards in 3 of his last 4, 3 touchdowns in 3 of his last 4. That provides a high floor for us for cash. And we like that he throws downfield aggressively. He leads all quarterbacks in percentage of passes of 20-plus yards, passing 21.3% of his dropbacks. He's a great stacking option with Robert Foster in tournaments, who's got a 24.0 average depth of target. We're going to see this team enter the New England as currently, I think, the 13-point road dogs. They're going to need to be passing a lot. They're going to need to make big plays on offense, and Allen can do that through the ground and through the air.
All right, Scott, I'm going to get you out of here with this question before we get to your article. 2 teams in DGAF mode. You're forced to start one quarterback Is it an expensive Aaron Rodgers or a cheap Sam Darnold?
Yeah, it definitely wouldn't be Darnold off of his best game of the year. Still don't really trust him. He's one of our worst graded quarterbacks over at PFF. Aaron Rodgers, yeah, if he plays and he's taking the game seriously and is going to play the whole game, I do like him. I just don't know that the team's going to let him play.
It seems like he wants to play. There are a couple of quotes that came out. You can't lead the team from the sidelines voluntarily sitting down. So it seems like Aaron Rodgers is probably going to be out there this week. All right, let's jump to your article here. So it's actual opportunity. Scott spends a lot of time on this, a lot of spreadsheets. One of the main things you should probably read on PFF every week. We give you a little bit of a sneak peek here on the show and on the pod. So Scott, tell me how we can kind of, there's only a couple of weeks left for us to use this information. How are we going to use it in week 16?
Yeah, you're going to use it for DFS purposes. You're going to read the article, find out who's seen an uptick in usage in recent weeks, and how that relates to their price tag on whatever site. And I wrote this article before the fever set in, so it's good. Trust me.
Yeah, I know. We're also on this show. I'm apologizing for it. We are all definitely under the weather today.
Yeah, but anyway, this is better than I'm going to be on the podcast. Apologies. But I took a deep look at all of the potential injury related values with Gore out, Crowell out, Ito Smith out, Aaron Jones out, Todd Gurley, Breida, Spencer Ware, Lamar Miller, questionable, how that opens up value. Elsewhere, I like the Alshon Jeffrey thing. I talk about what Nick Foles means for Ertz and Jeffrey. Mike Williams, if Keenan Allen's out. Talk about Deshaun Hamilton as a sleeper, Robbie Anderson as a sleeper. Why I really like Marlon Mack this week, Robert Foster, whether or not he's a good play, which I think is a debate. Chris Carson, and then top values.
Yeah, you got Derrick Henry in here. Does Derrick Henry have the most useless 11 touchdown fantasy season, right? Like you couldn't use him all year.
Right.
You probably didn't start him the one big week. He probably came through for you last week if you used him, but right? Huge season. The totals look great. And you probably only got 1 week of production out of Derrick Henry, right?
This is why I stress, in redraft leagues especially, but also in DFS, but go after those bell cow running backs who see a high snap share, are used extensively in the running and receiving game, because this is like the same season as, Doug Martin 2015, where he only had 4 RB top 15 weeks. So yeah, that's a great point. But he's off the main slate this week, but you're starting him in every league you have him this week.
Yeah, if you're still in the finals, definitely. Who would have thought Derrick Henry risen from the dead in the past 3 weeks for fantasy revival to lead you to the championship, along with a whole bunch of other cheap running backs we're going to talk about here. But first, Tyler, I'm going to start with you at running back. So I'm going to go down the list of the expensive running backs this week, and there's only one that I think is a surefire can't miss this week. So I'm going to give the guys who I have some questions about. Christian McCaffrey, right? Loses his quarterback. Not really sure how that's going to play. Although I was looking at the blitz, Cardi's thing here. Cardi is loving the Carolina backup this week. Let me just tell you on that right now. I don't know if that's adjusted everything yet, but he is just crushing the projections right now. I'm not sure I'm in 100% agreement on that. Saquon Barkley, right? Maybe no Odell Beckham. Could be playing from behind. Eli Manning's garbage. I know he's cheap, but I question the ability of just the Giants to even get into scoring position in this game. Alvin Kamara going to be splitting work. His price is a little bit down. This leaves Zeke Elliott, who's just touching the ball. His touches right now are just so much on a higher level than anybody else. It's impossible to overlook him. I know he did it a little bit last week, but he still had, 18 attempts and 8 targets. Had 19 fantasy points without even getting into the end zone on DraftKings. Now he gets to face Tampa Bay, who over the past 5 weeks has allowed an average of 30-plus fantasy points to opposing running backs, and Zeke's in there every play. Seems like a can't miss.
Yeah, he's the one lock that I have right now. You can't beat his volume. Cash lock, guy I want to feature heavily in tournaments. Tampa has allowed 100-plus rushing yards to 5 straight opponents, 7 total touchdowns allowed during that span. Dallas is currently a 7.5-point favorite here, playing at home, indoors in December. There's nothing more really to say here. Zeke's a lock.
Yeah. Scott, are you in agreement? If you have the cash, Zeke's probably the running back you want this week?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So do you want to touch on McCaffrey or Barkley? I know you got a list listed here. I'm down on both of them a little bit. I know Barkley's still going to get some run. I just question the Giants without Odell Beckham are just a horrible, horrible offense. And I know Indy's going to put up points, but I don't know. I just don't see a lot of use for these guys on my team this week.
Yeah, I definitely want to pay up for Zeke. I think he scored 19 fantasy points last week. That's definitely his floor in what was ultimately a shutout. His volume, by my data, is top 10 since 1992. His most recent 6-game stretch. Christian McCaffrey actually is outscoring him over that span. Still really like him despite the quarterback change, but I do want to hear what the coaching staff wants to do with him, if they're going to pump the brakes at all. Barkley, I still love. I think, matchup's good. He's strong where Indianapolis is most vulnerable, which is to receiving running backs. Yeah, I like all three guys. That's been the winning formula for DFS this year.
Yeah.
Trying to fit 2 or 3 of those guys, and I think I'm going to try and do the same this week.
Yeah, Barkley did get a $1,500 price increase, so he's much more interesting than if he was $9,400. So he's $7,900. So the price is tempting, but I think I would easily play Zeke over him this week. The mid tier, not even the mid tier, the next tier, Tyler, it's filled with all the guys I want to play. We got Nick Chubb, who's in a can't miss spot at home against Cincinnati. Really hard for me to see him fail. I still think Mixon can probably get it done. We've got Dalvin Cook, who looks like they're establishing the run again, involved in the passing game. And Snacks Harrison for Detroit. He didn't practice today. Jalen Samuels probably a little bit too high on DraftKings for my liking. If you're playing on Yahoo this week in their big tournament, he's just $14 over there. I like his price tag over there. But like the second tier and then like the next tier below this is where I think you can play Zeke with 2 of these mid-tier guys and really make a strong lineup this week.
Yeah, I agree with that a lot, especially Nick Chubb. The problem is, though, I feel like we're paying this absolute ceiling here for Chubb, considering his lack of receiving game. It's still a fantastic matchup here against the Bengals. Definitely one that we want to target here. Bengals have allowed opposing backfields to combine for 38.3 DraftKings points per week over the past 5 outings. Considering Duke Johnson has very little to do with this backfield nowadays, we can expect Chubb to get a large percentage of that 38 points. He scored 27.8 the last time they faced each other just a few weeks ago. I think a 30-burger is very realistic for him. Looking at the other backs, Mixon's a guy I also like. It's just kind of conflicting trying to play 2 backs like of their skills and style in the same game. If you're multi-entering, I think you should get some exposure to both. I think James Conner plays over Jalen Samuels this week. It's still kind of early.
He didn't practice today. Everything I read. So this was at 5:00 tonight. Conner didn't practice. He's trying. It's day by day. He can walk around, but he's just not ready yet. Is basically the quote out of Conner's mouth. I don't know. I'm on the other side of that. I don't think Conner's going to end up playing this week.
Okay, well, yeah, if he's truly questionable, then yeah, we need to keep paying attention to news. And then, like you said, Jalen Samuels will be a smash button lock on Yahoo.
Yeah.
Dalvin Cook, I'm a little apprehensive about with the Lions. If Snacks plays, I didn't know he didn't practice today, but if he is in there, I'm a little apprehensive against this team. They're both going to be playing pretty slow paced games. I don't think we're going to see the running game thrive like it did last week. That's kind of it for the mid tier or the upper mid tier. I think I like Chubb the best of this group.
Yeah, Scott, I'm going to go to you to the next tier because the next tier also loaded, right? Marlon Mack, 5,500. Every single one of his performances this year that's been, so he had a 31, a 34, and then a 29. He's been like 2% owned in DFS on all of those. For one reason or another, he goes off when nobody's on him. He will be a little bit more popular this week, but I think it's for good reason. He's 5,500. That is definitely too cheap in my opinion. We've got Jamal Williams. I don't know if you got a take on him. Not very good, but had a reasonable performance last week and against Chicago nonetheless. So it looks like he's going to be getting a workhorse role. You can scroll down, Tevin Coleman looks like with Ito Smith, Devontae Freeman gone. Is Jeremy Langford going to slow down Tevin Coleman's touches this week, or is this finally the week Tevin Coleman gets a full workload?
Brian Hill.
Yeah, Brian Hill. Are they going to give Tevin Coleman the courtesy of, we know you're going to be a free agent, we're not going to re-sign you, go get your 20 touches? You don't think they're going to do that this week?
No, I don't think so. And even if they do give him more of a bell cow workload, I don't think it's that great. So over the past 5 weeks, Atlanta ranks third worst in team running back expected fantasy points. So even if it's like a lion's share of the work, it's still like not as good as it's going to be for Jamal Williams, who's someone I like more. But let me talk about the first running back you mentioned first, which was Marlon Mack. So since returning from injury, he averages 25.2 fantasy points per game in victories by more than a field goal. It's 4 such games. And then in all other games, he averages 8.3. So that's massive. So that explains to me fully why has he been so boom or bust. And it's obvious. He's in a running back by committee situation, but he is the lead back, and he's more game script dependent than not. Mm-hmm. But, either 9-point favorites, the Giants rank bottom 3 in schedule adjusted fantasy points per game to opposing running backs. Then Jamal Williams, yeah, like you said, he's inefficient compared to Aaron Jones, but we've seen a bell cow workload from him before with a lot of productivity, and even without Aaron Jones in the lineup. So from weeks 11 to 17 of last year, Williams played on 91% of the snaps, and he averaged 19 fantasy points per game over that span. That's a solid sample of games.
Williams or Mack? You got to pick one, Scott. Who you got?
I'd probably go Mack, but I really like both a lot.
Mm-hmm. Tevin Coleman or Elijah McGuire, Scott?
McGuire.
All right. Tyler, who you got between those two? The 2 questions I just asked Scott.
Ditto, same. Mack and McGuire.
I understand McGuire. Anyone have a strong take on, want to sell the people on Elijah McGuire?
He reached the end zone in back-to-back games, 20-plus touches in each of those last 2 games. That's the kind of volume we're looking for. He's seeing 68.3% of his backfield's touches during that span. Packers have one of our bottom 10 run-graded defenses. I like it here for McGuire.
How do you have that all written? Oh, all right. He was on the sheet, so you had a couple things ready to go. I'm like, how do you just know that off the top of your head there?
I'm not that good.
Any other running backs anyone wants to key on? Let me make sure we talk to everybody. Looks like you had the Saints here, Tyler. You want to talk to them with maybe the Saints DST? There's last year, you used to be able to play Ingram and Kamara and just crush every single week, even though it doesn't make any sense to be able to do that. Do you want to use both, or you got a preference this week?
Yeah, that's kind of exactly what my blurb here is. We've seen historically playing both has paid off. It just hasn't happened for whatever reason in 2018. I kind of like the idea of playing both with their defense. Pittsburgh's secondary is looking pretty good down the stretch. So I think I'd rather try to attack this Pittsburgh defense with the run game via Kamara and Ingram. Stacking these backs with their DST could be a very unique way to approach this game that should draw a lot of ownership.
Scott, you got anyone else you want to talk about at the running back position? Jordan Howard, Tariq Cohen, any of these guys?
Dalvin Cook's off the main slate. Joe Mixon.
Cook's on the main slate.
Oh, is he?
Yes.
So yeah, Dalvin Cook and Joe Mixon. I worry about game script with Dalvin Cook a little bit, but he still ranks 3rd in fantasy points per game over the last 3 weeks. And Mixon ranks behind only Derrick Henry over the last 2 weeks. Massive workload over that span. They're both in that middle tier we were talking about before.
All right. Tyler, I want to talk a little bit about the Pat Thorman's article. I gave this a good read before the show, and I wanted to point out the main thing I want to talk about here is, normally we go through the big games. And I noticed I didn't see Pittsburgh and New Orleans up here on the top. So I scrolled to the bottom, and he's throwing some shade on the Pittsburgh-New Orleans game here. Because, you just talked about the New Orleans running backs on how they want to play a little bit slower and run the ball. And Pat goes through in good detail. Pittsburgh's no huddle. It's much more effective at home. They use it a lot more. They play a little bit slower on the road. Is there a reason this is the game everybody's going to want to play? And we fell for the trap last week. Pittsburgh, New England, Big Ben and Tom Brady were like something 28% of the owned quarterbacks in the Millionaire Maker. Is Pat onto something here? Do you think this game could be a little bit underwhelming? We've seen the Saints defense really just been crushing week in, week out right now as well.
Yeah, and it's kind of one of the reasons why I'm kind of interested in the running backs here. I think if the Saints do slow this game down, they'll be doing it via rushing. We've seen them run quite heavily over the past 3 games while they've been on the road. I think that might continue here while they're at home. Keeps Pittsburgh explosive offense off the field. Pittsburgh has traditionally played slower, as Pat mentions here, while on the road. But it's the Superdome. It's tough, man. These are two conflicting things.
I just wanted to point it out because it threw caution to the wind to me. I know Pat's very smart, and I just wanted to bring this up that we fell for it last week. That was a low scoring game. I don't know. Maybe something might be up here. It's the Superdome. There's a lot of different ways. If you tell me this game's 33-30, I believe you. If you tell me it's 45-10, I believe you. If you tell me it's 17-10, I believe you. There's just a lot of different ways this game can play out. So I just wanted to point it out that Pat brought a little bit of caution to the wind, and maybe, just maybe, he's onto something on this one. So I just wanted to point that out to everybody. Let's move on to some wide receivers for the week. And I don't know, I think most of my salary, at least in cash game, I got Zeke. I've got, a Nick Chubb. I've got, take your Marlon Mack or Jamal Williams or Elijah McGuire type running back. I don't have all the salary in the world, but if you do have some salary, Scott, I don't know, Julio Jones might not play. So let's pretend he doesn't play. We can't roster him. DeAndre Hopkins, a little bit hobbled, but he should be able to feast against Philadelphia, but he's expensive. Devontae Adams hasn't disappointed the entire season. The Steelers receivers are right there. Michael Thomas is a little bit too cheap in my opinion. Who you got up at the top this week?
Just in terms of value, I like Robert Woods quite a bit. He's going to be safe in the slot. He runs 71% of his routes from the slot. Arizona ranks 6th worst in fantasy points per game to opposing slot wide receivers. He's also seen really good volume since Cooper Kupp's injury. He ranks 5th among wide receivers in expected fantasy points per game over that span. Just too cheap, even with Jared Goff's recent struggles.
Mm-hmm.
And love DeAndre Hopkins, and I love Juju Smith-Schuster. So I just want to apologize to people. I had this big Juju Smith-Schuster rant on the podcast, and then that night Evan Silva called me on the phone and was like, "What, Barrett, what are you doing? Don't you know Juju's not in the slot anymore?" And so it's just like it wasn't a good take.
What's that like? Is that like your dad calling you to tell you you drank all the milk in the fridge or something and he's pissed at you? What's that like when you get the Evan Silva phone?
That's exactly what it's like. Yeah. I got to take my lecture, and you're right. I should have double checked that stat before the podcast. I also said they shut down Antonio Brown, but that was the ACL injury. So it pays to be friends with Evan Silva. He usually he catches it in time before you make yourself look foolish. But it is a Juju week this week. New Orleans ranks 2nd worst in fantasy points per game allowed to opposing outside wide receivers. Most in schedule adjusted fantasy points per game to wide receiver 2s. Eli Apple definitely does not scare me as much as Marshawn Lattimore, which is who I think Antonio Brown is going to see in shadow coverage. DeAndre Hopkins, probably best possible matchup Philadelphia is giving up the most fantasy points per game to outside wide receivers, the second most schedule adjusted, the third most schedule adjusted over the last 5 weeks. And he's just a beast. He's just probably arguably the best wide receiver in the NFL.
If it goes a pass goes to DeAndre Hopkins, he's probably going to catch it if it's like within a catchable distance. The dude is just probably the strongest hands in football. When you see him catch the football, absolutely crazy. Tyler, what are you doing at the top here? Help me try to separate some of these guys, right? Hopkins, Adams, Antonio Brown looks a little bit too cheap. Juju, Thielen's kind of fallen off a little bit. Michael Thomas, you got to pick a receiver in the Superdome shootout. I know you like the running game, but if you're forced to pick the receiver, I mean, it's really tough. Which one in cash games? I don't think I'd end up on any of them. I think Woods is a good place to start, like Scott said, on your cash games for a cash wide receiver with some upside. But up at the top, man, that's a really tough decision.
Yeah, I agree with the Woods call. He's going to be a core play of mine this week. But at the top, I love Nuke. I mean, this Eagles secondary is in shambles, running out fourth and fifth stringers. Definitely a play that you can definitely prioritize in tournaments, considering his ceiling. He's seen double-digit targets in each game over the past 3 weeks. And during that span, we've seen the Houston Texans see an uptick in passing. Watson's throwing attempts have gone up to respectable numbers. And as such, Nuke's been a bit more of a playable fantasy asset. Like I said, double-digit targets during that span, a 52% target share during that span as well. Like him a lot here this week, especially against a Philadelphia secondary that's allowing the most receptions on the year to opposing wideouts. He's the guy I'm paying up for.
I'm pumped. Antonio Davis has risen from the dead. He is back in the NBA basketball game tonight, so I'm going to accrue some more fantasy points. So when you have 100% Anthony Davis, you needed that to happen after he was crushing already. So I got a smile on my face that will overcome my cold for the rest of the show now for sure. So we had Woods. Scott, you talked about Alshon Jeffrey. I see Tyler's on here too. Let's kind of rehash that a little bit. What's from your article? How much more does Nick Foles prefer Alshon Jeffrey? Alshon Jeffrey has been left for dead by Carson Wentz for the past couple of weeks.
Yeah, so I also tweeted about this. It's weird. Volume's actually better for Jeffrey with Wentz, but production's way better for Jeffrey with Foles, and the reverse is true for Zach Ertz. And it's a pretty decent sample of the last 2 seasons, postseason included. And I really think it's just I think quarterback rapport is a real thing. But basically, according to my data, if we look at it on a per route, per drop back basis, as typical routes run per game, you should average 15.0 fantasy points per game with Foles and 13.5 with Wentz. So that extra 1.5 definitely makes him even stronger value this week. I do like him quite a bit.
Tyler, you mentioned Woods. What else are we doing for some cash game wide receivers this week? I'm just I didn't have time to do a shell team, so I'm gonna plug in some guys that we talked about, and I'm gonna see how much I might have left at receiver. Give me 1 second here. But what are you looking at in like the mid to lower tier? For some, like we played Michael Gallup last week, a big old goose egg. We played guys like Sterling Shepard. I think I'm done trying to do that. What are we doing to replace these guys this week in kind of the mid and low tiers?
Yeah, it's kind of a gross week. I think you can go to Robbie Anderson. He's a guy that I'm pretty interested in this week. Since Darnold's return in week 14, he's seen a 29% target share, 46% market share of air yards. He scored in both games while seeing 18 total targets during that span. Green Bay secondary has allowed the 4th most touchdowns on the year and some big fantasy outings to opposing wideouts. The Packers may be kind of just running out this year and not really trying to win the rest of their games, losing interest. But the Jets are still kind of evaluating Darnold. I'm expecting them to fully test him, utilizing Anderson all over the field and targeting him pretty heavily. 4,500, he's a pretty good cash game option, I think, despite being a little more volatile than we normally go for. Another cheaper guy that I'm interested in is Chris Godwin, where I think he's just too cheap everywhere after 2 explainably poor games. I'm going back to the well here because the Bucs remain one of the league's most pass-happy offenses. Byron Jones is a stationary corner, staying on his side of the field, but Godwin moves all over the formation, should get plenty of routes run against Anthony Brown, who's our number 61 graded cornerback, and Chidobe Awuzie, our number 85. I think he's a great option for cash and tournaments this week.
And Godwin too. I don't know if it was PFF, but I saw somewhere charting over the past 2 weeks for Godwin, 13 targets. Only one of those was deemed a catchable target. Of course, he caught it because he's Chris Godwin. So they're just absolutely horrific throws have been getting to him too over the past couple of weeks. So a couple more. I mean, it is Jameis Winston, so you never really know. But I think his price is good. Scott, you got any interest in like the low to mid tier at wide receiver?
Yeah, I do like Robbie Anderson quite a bit. Josh Reynolds was another good call. Deshaun Hamilton, I think, is interesting if he's on the main slate.
He's off the main slate, so we can't use him or with Tim Patrick this week.
Bummer. What about Robert Foster in Buffalo?
Yeah, I think we can do that. So yeah, Foster, right? I mean, the price is getting up there, but he's got, the targets, the yards. They lost McKenzie too. Like, who else is there to catch these Josh Allen heaves in the second half, right?
Right. Also, Dante Pettis.
Yeah, I think all these guys look like they should have pretty reasonable projected ownership from what I see on the early week ownership here at RotoGrinders as well. What about Zay? Is anyone on Zay Jones, or are we just playing Robert Foster?
No, he has Stephon Gilmore this week.
All right.
Right. That's one we want to avoid.
Could we go back to Gallup? Didn't even get a target last week, Tyler. Is this like the flop leg on Michael Gallup?
I don't know. He led the team in air yards prior to that.
I know. It makes no sense.
The argument for him made total sense last week, but I'm not doing it.
I like Amari.
Yeah. Amari's a great play this week.
Trent Sherfield. I mean, this is what happens late season DFS. We play guys we haven't really heard of all season long. Anyone on Trent?
Yeah, if you want to stack in those heavy RBs, I think Trent's a viable option.
Yeah, I think that lurks good. Scott, you got anyone else you wanted to mention?
No, I don't think so.
I'm scrolling through here, seeing if I can find anybody. Oh, if Julio's out, what are we doing in the Atlanta passing game?
How serious is this Julio thing? I didn't read anything about it.
I think it was rips.
Yeah, it seems pretty like this seems like the most questionable he's been all season. I think it's legit 50-50 at this point.
I will say that if he's not playing, I kind of like the idea of Austin Hooper. The Carolina Panthers have been a funnel defense toward opposing tight ends all season. Hooper could be in play, considering how gross tight end was last week.
Hooper of the one target.
He could go anywhere with it.
Last week.
Yeah, he was banged up too last week, so yes. I think he's also on the injury report. So make sure to monitor that.
All right, I think that's going to wrap it up at wide receiver. Anyone? Let's move it on to tight end. Always a gross position. We don't have Travis Kelce on the main slate. We do have Kittle. We do have Ertz. We have Eric Ebron. We've got Gronk again. Evan Ingram had some targets. I think there are some reasonable things at the top. On the premium show I did last week, I said it was very unlikely for me to think any of the top tight ends wouldn't be the highest scoring tight end. Boy, was that wrong. Everybody stunk last week. I don't even want to throw out some of the names that were out there as leading tight end scorers on the week. I think Jeremy Sprinkle was like tight end 3 or 4 or something like that. Scott, disappointing position overall. What do we got here? Are we just paying up because we're just throwing darts if we're playing anybody? Do you think it's a wise decision to pay up for one of the top 5 this week?
Yeah, I think so. Maybe Evan Ingram if Odell Beckham Jr. is out again. Even if he's not, he's in play is a really good matchup. But no, I think I'm going to go up to one of Ebron, Kittle, or Ertz.
Tyler, what's your overall take on the position here? We got Gronkowski against, but he always likes playing against Buffalo here.
In Buffalo, that's the thing.
Yes, that is.
You need to make sure that's noted. I love Kelce if you're playing the Yahoo slate where you get that Sunday night hammer. Otherwise, I'm probably looking at Ebron. He was game scripted out of last week's shutout. Back-to-back shutouts are very rare. Not expecting that to happen again. Giants defense is one we can definitely attack. Ebron's been a target hog in this Colts offense ever since Doyle's been injured. He's been a touchdown hog this entire year. I like the two combinations of targets and touchdowns. I'll be going to him. He's a nice value on FanDuel, especially.
What about Ertz, right? 2 down games in a row kind of soured everyone's taste on him over the past 2 weeks. Does anyone have an Ertz take?
I'll say Scott mentioned it briefly earlier that Foles did like going to Ertz more often than Alshon. He had more success going to Alshon, but the volume was definitely there for Ertz. This past week was kind of rough. He didn't see many targets, I don't believe. He's a great regression bounce back candidate, though.
Hooper would be interesting if Julio's out. I don't think that's the worst play in the world. Scott, gun to your head. You're forced to choose between CJ Uzoma or Chris Herndon. This is what it's come down to. Week 16, NFL DFS, we need a tight end. Which one is it?
It would be Uzoma. He has the better matchup. I forget who he's against, but they ranked 3rd worst in schedule adjusted fantasy points per game to opposing tight ends.
The Browns with their little safety nonsense.
Yeah, over the last 5 weeks. Yep.
Anyone else at tight end you really want to talk about? I mean, you could dart throw on, right, like Vance McDonald and on Trey Burton and Cameron Brate and Jimmy Grant. You can just like take dart throws, but I don't know. I'm going to play a lot of tournaments this week. I think it's pretty much going to be all of the the top 5 tight ends on DraftKings, and then if Julio's out, I'll probably mix in some Hooper, and that's going to be my tight end pool for the week.
Yeah, hard to argue against that. We've seen tight ends fluctuate wildly this year. So if you're paying down, go all the way down. If not, get the studs.
I mean, we've gotten rid of kickers, right? Like it took us a while to do that. Now, all right, we need to focus, right? We got to get rid of tight ends. Just make wide receiver spots. Just make everything flex spots, in my opinion, right? Just let me roster anybody I want. The tight end position, always a tough one to crack. If you get the right one, you got yourself a big advantage on the field here. I did want to note, I noticed in Minnesota, they took some snaps away from Kyle Rudolph, and they gave them to, who was it, Tyler Conklin. Now, I know this game was a little bit of a blowout. Does anyone think that's a reasonable take this week at Detroit, or do you think Rudolph ends up getting most of the snaps again? It's 2,500 on DK.
Yeah, I'm not going to chase that.
No? Nobody else?
No.
All right. I guess that's going to wrap it up for this week. Again, apologize. All 3 of us definitely feeling under the weather this week. I'm going to go check out some NBA. Hopefully I can catch Anthony Davis back in the game. Probably he'll get hurt and exited as soon as I turn on the television. But go check out Pro Football Focus, Pat's article, Scott's article, all the other stuff over there. One of the best things. Only a couple weeks left, but they have stuff all through the season. I do a lot of dynasty stuff. If you're into fantasy all year round, a good PFF subscription, probably like a mainstay if you're like really into fantasy. All kinds of articles all year long. We're going to get out of here. Hopefully we're all feeling a little bit better for week 17. Thanks to Scott and Tyler for toughing it out with me. I'm Britt, and thanks to all you for watching. We out.